Hello, hello. Nice to see you all here. Yeah, so recently I've been working with a client on an RWA platform, just like everyone, and I have a few learnings from that I would like to share, and I hope they will actually be useful. So these are the distilled learnings from YieldBricks. Um, by the way, a little bit about me. I'm an ex-hack and security researcher. I got out I exited the casino at the right time. 120 projects, no missed issues. I like testing. I work with a few languages. Right now, I'm mostly doing fuzz testing and like some obscure research. I co-made WasmCov with Bartosz from Hacken, and I'm also like the technical co-founder of YieldBricks now. And by the way, I really like good public transport and bikes, so Belgrade, pretty good. Honestly, pretty good. Uh, Now let's start with a short poll. Who here has like a project that needs a with the KYC process in place? Two, three. Okay, okay. And who here thinks they may actually sort of need a KYC process? Okay. Uh, so for some of you that don't have it, other than compliance reasons, there may be some other stuff that I may mention that could change your mind about that. But let's start with an intro to KYC and AML stuff. So first, some acronyms, because KYC loves acronyms. Know your customer, anti-money laundering. Really crucial one is UBO, ultimate beneficial owner. And I guess PEPs, politically exposed persons, may be important, but not so much, in the Balkans. Uh, so what is KYC? In short, it's a process of verifying identities of clients and assessing risks of doing business with them. And the goal is to prevent, one of the major goals is to prevent your company being used for money laundering or illicit activities, And if you look at crypto in general, you will notice that Binance got a fine in 2023, which is an order of magnitude bigger than the sum total of all the rest of the fines in the world for that year for AML. So we can generally expect crypto companies to be like a massive target for fines. So just from a financial risk perspective, it may be good to have KYC. um, in general, globally, and this sort of an average, the following industries will mostly be regulated. That means bullion, gambling, and financial services. Crypto quite often is within like either financial services or gambling with various derivatives. But even for non-legislated industries or specific incorporations, KYC can be very, very useful if you're working in a risky industry, or if you're just, a risk averse, or you have risk averse suppliers, or if you're assessing customers with maybe large credit limits. So we're going to be looking at lending and borrowing, and you do not want to do that completely anonymously because, yeah, it's risky. Uh, it's especially useful for people in crypto actually because it can save you a major loss. Like there's a lot of people. Uh, it's a big difference whether you're trying to hire someone and you're hiring me, Noah Jelich, a public person. You know who I am. You could probably find out where I live. Uh, and I have a company incorporated in EU country, and working with a completely anonymous guy somewhere who you've never even seen the face of. And one of those carries a certain amount of risk. So just in general business, making sure that you actually know who you're working with can lower your general risk because you can find out, is this a reputable person with like a normal function, and this is something good KYC providers will do for you. They will figure out who this person really is. They will tell you, Not just that, yes, this is John Smith. They'll tell this is John Smith and he has these companies and he has this corporate veil to hide the ownership in these companies as well, etc. They will give you a little bit of extra information if they can. So it can really reduce risk, even if you're not just doing it to avoid fines. But moving to fines, what do you really need to be compliant? Well, the basic info. Let's start from the top. And by the way, this is not legal advice. This is like vague again because local laws are going to be different and going to depend on place of business. But for a company, you're gonna collect and verify the name, the address of the office or place of business. For proprietary companies, so public companies, of course, they're public. You know, the board, the director, blah blah blah. For proprietary ones, you're gonna need to verify the director. This is key. Like, I mean, in Serbia and Croatia, etc., in most of Europe, you have a public registry of companies and you can figure out who the director of anything is, even if they're proprietary. But go to Dubai and the registry is private. You cannot really figure out who the owner is. It's somewhat anonymous, which is tricky. And you know, breaking the corporate veil, finding UBOs. Someone may have a net of fractional ownership to hide that they're really the person that has everything. And then for each of those UBOs or directors, you need to do the individual process, which means name, all the past names. You need to know who they really are. Residential address, or full address of principal place of business, date of birth, and then verifying all of that, collecting registered business information, and checking sanction, PEP, and terrorism lists. So that's like the baseline here. But enough about legal stuff. Let's move to legal stuff. Okay. So yeah. The KYC provider has them. Okay, the KYC
Okay,
provider.
we have to do the KYC with a KYC provider because I assume these
it's
lists.
not something you're gonna be doing manually. It's a whole industry of having access to all sorts of information. It's a data brokerage. But talking about RWA, so you see a lot of blockchain solves all the problems of RWA and makes everything possible. But realistically, it's not quite like that. The biggest problems of RWA, or rather of fractionalized investing, which is what's mostly being pushed, is actually the fractionalization part, where you have a ton of legal work, and then blockchain is nothing special. It's a dummy representation of whatever. The tricky stuff is how do you make sure that your incorporation and your legal side is actually compliant for money laundering, that it doesn't take risk upon you, and that it is safe enough for your users. And some more learnings from YieldBricks. So there's three main methods. Okay, one that's been used a lot and hasn't really succeeded that much is SPVs, so special purpose vehicles. In short, I want to fractionalize this place, so I make a company, and the company owns this place and I have shares distributed. But due to cost of incorporating, that is usually going to be done in sanction list countries, where it's somewhat cheaper or less regulated to do stuff like that. And that creates a user safety issue because in case it goes belly up or gets rug pulled or whatever, it is very hard to sue someone in Palau. Okay. And you need basic KYC for investments or some sort of ownership scheme, but you're not really trying to be too compliant. And sale is capital gains in general. So if something happens, you're gonna be looking at a capital gains event. The other option is a regulated investment fund. This gets classified as a security, which is something that you may want to avoid. And honestly, it's just useless for most investors because you need to be an accredited investor, which based on country can be anywhere between 50 and 500k minimum investment. So that's not really the people that want to do fractional investment. it doesn't really have an overlap with the target base. But with more interest, we get more advanced solutions, and thus we eventually get to the lend borrow model. So the lend borrow model works like this. One tricky thing about this is that you need a lot of capital because you need to be able to buy everything. It is not crowdfunding. You cannot be like, hey, yeah, we want to collect 500k here and then buy something. No, you need to have 500k, buy something, and then create a lend borrow contract. Okay, and the way it works is you are distributing any yields as interest. Okay, for property that you own. KYC responsibility is shifted somewhat because it's not a security and because of some other stuff. And it's gonna vary by country, but in general, you're still gonna want to be KYC compliant. It has a low capital barrier because no need to be an accredited investor, so you can have like 500k. Regarding safety, it's much better for users because they can sue you. They can sue you. They can have a class action lawsuit if they want against you if something goes wrong, because you can incorporate something like this in a much better country, much easier. So it makes it actually safer for users and does better for you because people will actually be using it. Other than that, it is also from the compliance side, it allows you like a software AML dispute resolution because the lend borrow relation is seen differently than like an ownership relation, right? Uh, like, I borrowed 500k from someone is not the same as I sold something. It's just slightly different. And it minimizes the risk of business collapsing due to excessive AML fines that way. And it's pretty much what we are using at YieldBricks. And now onto the on-chain implementation. Let me just check. I just barely have a timer. Okay. Now for implementing this on crypto, again, crypto is not the important part here. This would work just about fine with the database, but it is very useful to save some banking fees and to make it more globally available because you're shifting some of the risk for doing business with you from yourselves to the user until regulation hits, right? So this part is more or less three things. We have the ownership structure, we have the compliance logic, which can be very advanced, and on-chain it can also include some security features. And then we have the KYC information. And now you may be thinking, okay, there's just a gazillion RWA projects or like compliant projects, and everyone's talking about KYC for years. But this stuff is not really standardized that much. Or rather, there are KYC providers with very good selling points, but when you look into implementing any of this, you're gonna fairly quickly realize that there's a whole lot of stubs, a whole lot of projects that were created and then just died with nobody really using them, nobody supporting them, that have some very proprietary specific feature set. So let's start with the ownership structure. We can choose what we want to go with. We can go with like, on Ethereum, a few different standards. NFT standard is not great because it's gonna incur fairly high transfer costs since it's mapping to IDs. ERC 1155 is a bit more efficient, but honestly, it's not that supported, and it doesn't bring massive advantages just if you know how to use like a factory pattern. In that case, it's not that great. So ERC20 is looking pretty good, but you're reading about and you're like, okay, there's this thing called ERC3643, which is like a compliant token, permissive token standard, and you take a look at it. But realistically, it has a few problems. Mainly the fact that the company that made that is not terribly active, and that it's pretty much just a very, very, very convoluted proprietary model. So it's like for developers here, it's like Java factory pattern level of convoluted for no reason. So they just went too far with that, and it's like semi-open source contracts with pretty much closed source front end and everything. So I'm not sure how it managed to get standardized like this, seeing that it's literally just a proprietary product. Uh, so not something we would use. So that leaves us with ERC20 as the only real option. And then we have like the other parts, which is the compliance logic and KYC part. So for compliance, you want you can do anything you want, pretty much. No standardization, but what we went with was a function that checks if something is transferable and then takes all the information it can get. So that information is going to be who is transferring to who, which token, and how much of it. Okay? And here we can add custom limitations. We can say, okay, you know what? We just got an order and nobody from Alaska can trade on our platform anymore. We're just going to have to temporarily prevent those transfers. And we can do a broad blocking like that using the KYC information that we have on chain. Or we can limit transfer amounts to, I don't know, based on general like unmarked transfer rules, blah blah blah. Like stuff like that is available because you can implement anything you want at the compliance level. And it gives pretty granular control while minimizing risk to the company. For KYC info, we have one unique thing, which is we can have multiple wallets per customer, which can be tricky, but honestly, you just need to duplicate KYC info to each wallet. And we need multi-sig support, so 1271, right, is going to be a necessary implementation if we're going to be supporting signatures and standards like that for KYB, right? Because we're not just going to be working with retail, you're also going to try to work with businesses. And for businesses, you need to really replicate all the decision-making processes, because at the end, a person needs to be liable for something, and that liability needs to be non-reputable. So you need the same structure. You can get a lot of this KYC info on chain. So as I mentioned, granular control over country, or transfer amounts, or whatever you want. As well as eventually, even travel rule implementation. One thing that a lot of people forget is continuous monitoring. So just because someone is not on a sanctions list today doesn't mean they will not run to Bosnia tomorrow. So that can also happen. And finally, we get to like the key thing, which is security. And here we have like again, no. Although it looks very mature and like there's a ton of projects building everything with so many ready-made solutions, there are not many real ready-made solutions. So you're gonna want a good KYC data provider. Those ones are not in general providing random data feeds on the blockchain as well. There's like a disjointed graph of good KYC providers that will actually get you all the good data about someone, and the ones that do like some very basic verification but will put it on chain for you. If you want real quality, you're gonna go with like a normal KYC provider that's targeting businesses, and you're gonna be putting that data on chain yourself. So here you need to think again, and this is why like you really need to be security minded, because if you're putting stuff on chain, if you're putting KYC data on chain, now you're taking responsibility for how these people are allowed to do something. So we want to make sure that is also secure. In our case, that means a decision to, of course, use multisigs for the admin roles, but also for any hot wallet, such as a wallet that allows users to add KYC data on chain, to rotate that weekly. And to just have it hard coded that if it's older than a week, if a private key is older than a week, you cannot use it anymore. As in, you know, for it's constantly rotating, which also means, and this is key, that you have like a RPO that's a week. In short, if you have a key leak, if somebody hacks into your actual deployment where your hot wallet is stored, you're not going to be exposing yourself to any more than a week of data loss or a week of risk to people misusing KYC. Plus, again, granular control, such a regular rate of rotation allows you to also have like blacklists for the signer keys, which you can just broadly remove weeks of verified people in case you notice a problem without incurring, the cost of re-verifying 10,000 people. So a lot of risk management there. And this was like a mix of abstract and specific. So I hope it was not too technical for everyone, but our setup, you can see it on here. So this is our website, and there's a link to our repo there, where you can get a bit more information. In short, our final setup, and again, maybe too technical depending on the audience, is a beacon proxy to get maximal efficiency on the individual properties that we're tokenizing through lend borrow legal structure incorporated in Dubai, with a compliance module with rotating keys handled by a multisig, and sale and distribution separately handled to remove individual system risk, which can also all be explored in our GitHub repo for the technical people. That's it. Thank you, and Q&A.
Any questions? Yep.
Hi, thank you for this interesting presentation. So in the last bit, you mentioned KYC data on chain, and you also talked about the issues involved with the KYC providers. Now I'm coming from a verifiable credential decentralized identity background, and like one of the grave mistakes that anyone in the industry tries to avoid is putting KYC or user data on chain. So what exactly goes on chain and why?
So you're gonna be putting the minimum amount that you need to remove your risk. You're gonna need a country code on chain related to a wallet for a start, because the country level regulations are the ones that happen the most. Other than that, you're just gonna need some identifying hash. So that's not gonna be anything that can be, just a hash of some identifying piece of data that could be an email or whatever, something that you're really a user ID. Nothing more identifiable than that is needed. So country, in case you have some additional filtering, for example, somebody is on a PEP list and you now get like I can no longer work with this person, you're gonna want that as well. But you can mask some of this data. Again, nothing on chain is really private, but you can get around and mask this. So you do not need too many broad things. Like, do not put anything more than you need based on your current legal opinion. For us, that means country, and anything else can be handled through, blocking individual wallets or blocking signers, etc.
And so you mentioned hashes. Why don't you implement something, let's say, more advanced, like BBS Plus or like advanced signature schemes?
Hashing is fine for validating information. I mean, a hash and a signature provides you non-repudiation and hides the information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.